Today with me again, Alex Lee, who will moderate the session, and a panel of incredible speakers that he will be kindly presenting very soon. For those who don't know, let me just tell you that TiiQu Talks is an initiative by TiiQu aiming to share knowledge in the sustainability and the emerging technology space. The idea is to make knowledge in a very digestible and bite-sized form so that everyone can consume it on the go. So I hope you will enjoy the session, as it is really a very interesting one. And I leave the floor to Alex for taking the session further. Thank you very much for everyone for being here.
Thank you, Laura. I will share my screen first. Well, welcome everyone. Today's event is about the sustainable product in the circular economy, especially we're in Generation G fibre. So you know that it's a long history, but too often this fantastic event actually that we have a hard time because of the reason is because of this subject matter, because the sustainable product is very important, and they actually lay over the very broad aspect of the business. For example, they are related to sustainable business and sustainability and ESG. Also, they are related to circular economy, and traditionally they are also related to a supply chain management and product management or customer management. So initially I had a difficult to actually recruiting the expert in here, because I just think about who might be particularly have expertise in here. So I'm looking at for example, is some historical background. I'm looking at the keyword a sustainable product in the LinkedIn, and I only find a few have a job title like a sustainable product management or something like that. So initially I was very surprised. Oh, this is very important topic. Why not any specific? And later I found that because the reason is related to every aspect of the business. Actually, they not specifically title as a sustainable product, right? But you know that today these speakers, 5 distinct speakers, have a different lore in related to sustainable product supply chain strategy and even environmental circular. You know, that's why. So finally, we have more than expected 5 distinct speakers who share their insight and their experience and knowledge. So you see that in this agenda that this is very broad topic, right? So for example, that what is really mean by the sustainable product? What is the definition and what makes the sustainable product, right? It can be in a meaningfully simple, but in deeper level is very difficult. So I think that we fortunately we have a expert in this field, so we have a bright discussion and a bright explanation about this, and also sustainable treat of the sustainable product. What makes this one sustainable product, and then what is the attribute, and then how actually to measure the performance of sustainable products, so measurement, and especially relate to this measurement and then evaluation and something like that. We are very interested in product life cycle assessment, right? So we fortunately also have an expert in this field, so we'll hear from him about what is meant by the LCA, and then he will give a one-on-one type talk. And then we are how we actually develop this sustainable product, right? Because the sustainable product actually, for example, in the company wise, and not just for the manufacturing, right? Because it is related to a sourcing and supply chain and then manufacturing and customer relationship and everywhere, waste management and recycling. So it is a fantastic topic. And then how actually the business can exploiting this opportunity it can be a risk, also can be an opportunity. So how actually they implementing this as a business model. And then also like what the best practice. So we also have an expert in the real life management, this one. So we'll hear from him about it. And then how actually the relate to like a circular, like a business, how actually to relate to circular product. And then so that's why I explained like a sustainable product in intersection between the traditional sustainability and then circular economy. So we will looking at what is like there is an integrated view of this sustainable product. Okay, so as I explained, we have 5 distinguished speakers. So they will talk individually about 10 minutes, so like a keynote time, and then they will share their inside experience and knowledge. So we are in order in like a 4. You will be the first, and then Peter, you will be the next, and Abhijit, you will be the third, and then Alexis, you will be the fourth, and finally Bell, you will be the final one. So I'm not specified any like in specific order. I just put in here. So you can in order like a Paul, Peter, and then Alexis and Bell. You will be in this order. So in your turn, and you can start whether you talk or you're present. So I'm not going to talk about later because I give you some reference that you can leverage what is meant by the circular economy, what is meant by the sustainable product, and also like some reporting, and then some basic like introduction. So I already explained that the sustainable product in the like all the like life cycle management, and then starting from the resorting, and then the reuse, and the waste management or something like this. So they will cover the all fields. So without any delay, we will start our individual talk, starting from Paul. Okay. Paul, would you
Hi.
please?
Good afternoon. Hi. So my name is Paul Stockwell. I'm a consultant with a sort of recent background in sustainability in the fibre and textile sector. So I was going to talk really about the sort of fashion sector and what it's doing, and how it's sort of responding to Generation Z. So the fashion sector is one of the largest global polluters. I mean, that's well documented, and current projections show that this will only increase with higher global production and the demand that's forecast. Within fashion, there are linear models. We're very, we're clear we can see the sort of disposable fast fashion are a problem alongside sort of ethical, social, environmental challenges that the sector faces. We know that Generation Z are more informed. They're asking more questions about the products they purchase. And if you refer to the recent McKinsey State of Fashion report, 43% of Gen Z say they intentionally buy from companies that have a robust sustainability reputation. So brands and manufacturers recognize they need to do more, but importance of striking a balance between internal, for example, supply chain and shareholders' expectations versus the sort of external audiences, the customer, the regulatory environment, NGOs, media, and so on. And I think it's also important to note that businesses have been quick to call themselves sustainable, but what measures are really being used, whether ethical, social, environmental, and economic. And what we're seeing now is a sort of response to this, a sort of increasing regulatory move against greenwashing, just simply saying that our product is sustainable without evidence to support it. So I think development of recognized sustainability standards is important, coalescing around measurements where there's broad agreement, and LCAs, and I think fellow speakers will be touching on this, are really important. And we've seen this through the product environmental footprint at the EU level, which seeks to kind of measure the carbon footprint, particularly in the garment and textile space, is a really interesting model. But that's not without criticism. And I think the role of respected organizations and standards bodies is critical in creating valid recognized benchmarking. And I use the example of Textile Exchange. They're one such example, a large membership organization taking on this challenge. And they're using everything from material change indexes as part of their kind of corporate fiber materials benchmarking work. And these are all linked to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So there are already organizations, say, taking this on. I think when you look at the topic of blockchain, within sustainability. I think that's really interesting. It's a fascinating area. If you boil it down, I mean, blockchain arguably has two goals: to provide transparency, enabling consumers to check sustainability claims of the product, and secondly, to provide traceability by enabling the verification of a product's authenticity and ownership. So blockchain or similar tools play an important role in providing consumer reassurance and confidence, as evidenced by the sort of Gen Z figures I touched on earlier. I think it's important as well with blockchain and supply chain traceability that it builds the trust of employees, our environmental advocates, the labour market, investors and regulators as well. And it's also an important tool in tackling counterfeit. And I think if you look at the example of blockchain and how it's being used in the luxury space, Aura, which has been developed by Prada, LVMH and Richemont, is an interesting move in that direction, where they're creating a sort of targeted luxury blockchain technology platform, which has the ambition of creating passports to ensure authenticity and traceability of the brand's products. And within that passport, you have proof of origin, life cycle tracking, and intellectual property protection. So those are really kind of interesting developments in the blockchain space. And then I think also what we're seeing as well is the combination of digital and physical. So in other areas, we're seeing the use of DNA markers within fibers such as cotton, so that you can physically track the product through the supply chain. So there's some really interesting areas here in providing that kind of customer consumer reassurance. I think I'd also just touch on responsible innovation. That's a really interesting space and something I'm actually doing at the moment with University College London, where you see sustainability is evolving and the role of responsible innovation, which is sort of looking at it from sort of a holistic approach right at the beginning. So when you're actually creating a product, are you building in a responsible innovation regime into that framework? And that's really quite important, particularly when you're looking at products other than fashion, where they may have a much wider sort of economic and social impact. I think it's also in the space of fibers and textiles, we're seeing some really interesting moves towards laboratory grown fibers and textiles. It's fascinating and an exciting step forward. But I think it's important that as you bring something new into the market, that the claims around it are substantiated and clearly communicated, which I think comes back to this point about responsible innovation. And I think just sort of finally, a point to mention is circularity. And this is obviously a theme of the session. Fashion does struggle with this sort of linear approach. There has been a significant move towards circularity, and organizations such as Ellen MacArthur Foundation have been really pushing this point. And I think that's really, really important. And I think Gen Z particularly get that. And we're seeing that rise, particularly with Gen Z consumers in the sort of reuse secondhand market. I use examples of Vinted and Depop in the UK. But there's also a challenge here is whether the recycled market is actually just driving more primary production. So are consumers just buying more because they know they can sell it on? So there's an interesting area to explore it further here. So I think in conclusion, Gen Z consumers hold a lot of power. And I think in response to that, businesses, brands need to have a clear strategy about how they effectively deliver sustainability. They need to work alongside recognized, respected standards and work alongside respected organizations as well. They need to embrace responsible innovation. They need to embed circularity. And they need to ensure that transparency, traceability, blockchain is incorporated to provide consumers with the right and accurate information that they need to ultimately make informed choices. So that's my short speech. So thank you.
Thank you for. I think that his insight is very great because he touched on every aspect of the sustainable product, especially the importance of the digital technology, especially blockchain, to manage the sustainable product. And also he touched in many aspects, especially the interesting topic will be the fashion industry. So we may discuss further in the panel discussion later. Okay, next, Peter.
Okay, let me share my screen, which I'm hoping you can see. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very good. Okay, everybody. I'll let you read the bio. I won't talk too much about myself. Basically, I've been working in food standards now for 25 years. I've founded a number of standards and went into sustainability about 16 years ago. Very early on in one of my first roles at Tesco, when I joined them and they started to go into sustainability, I gave a speech at the World Congress on sustainability in Dublin. And I was one of the keynote speakers. And I made a statement that caused a tremendous amount of media attention in the trade. I said, there's no such thing as a sustainable product. We might manage responsible at this stage. That was about 15 years ago. And as you'll see from my talk, you'll see that the more you learn about this space, or I do anyway, the more one realizes how little we all know. Really, there is no end point to sustainability, and I'll try and do my best. I've been very fortunate to manage some really big companies and continue to advise big companies. I've been custodian of a really big famous brands. And I guess in the early days, and 10 years of the last 15 of my years in sustainability, actually I've been in private equity. And despite what people think, I've used private equity as an absolute lever to ensure that the investors took interest in what we now call ESG. In those days, we didn't call it ESG. I've actually had nothing but support, but I had to do a lot of hard work to educate, the investors, the execs, all the senior leadership team meetings, everyone to shop floor on the risks of not incorporating sustainability in the business model. So I'll approach this really very simply because obviously one doesn't understand the whole capability of the audience. A really friendly expectation management notice. We don't mislead or greenwash. And I'm proud of the fact that I've launched the best part of 3,500 new certified products, and I have 0 NGO greenwash accusations or challenges. And there's a reason for that. It's because I've used an authentication tool to put all products through a process. So how does one do that? Well, it's very important to understand that some companies know all this, and there's a great deal of education, but there's a big difference between people that are educated in sustainability and have got degrees even in them and MSCs and all of that, and they've never run a business in their life. There is a really big difference between that and managing thousands of people from top to bottom, where most of the workers on production lines may have not even left high school. So you really have to remember these kind of challenges when we try and operationalize, sustainable development inside businesses. And I'm very passionate about that because, of course, I've had to do that across over 23 countries. So there are these 3 pillars, and they did come out of a very, very big piece of work that was commissioned by the UN, which was called the Brundtland Commission. They synthesized all this work, and in 87 or so, they came up with this famous sustainable development sort of definition, which says that we develop that sustainable development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It's a very, very noble sort of definition, and the challenges of it are exceptionally difficult because it wasn't designed to be some kind of a metric statement. And we're at the stage in sustainability globally where we're trying to metricate everything. And there is a convention that, clearly what you do is you operate all of these pillars in some kind of a balance. So normally what you're trying to do is, let's just say you want to invest in reducing your risks upstream in your supply chain on sourcing. Let's just say it could be in agriculture, it could be a forest-based product, it could be a land-based product, it could be an ocean-based product. You do that, but you actually have to invest, especially if you're a first mover. And whilst we've been sort of working on this for quite a number of years, we are still in some sectors, still first movers. And that means you disproportionately invest for a product at the beginning to get a return benefit later on in its lifetime. And of course, when you do that, you also have to invest in some kind of a social aspect. So all of these are quite difficult to balance, because they don't all operate, in tandem with each other or in parallel in the same phase. And of course, something that I understood in very, very early on, partly because I guess I'm in the UK because of a guy called John Elkington. Something called the people, planet, and profit. So we swapped over, the economic, environmental, and social, and we've started to build some of the aspects around. So what is it we've got to do in each space, and how do we start to measure our progress, etc. Now, when you're trading products between each other, like I have been doing for a number of years, and our first was in the supermarket sector, then I went into the manufacturing sector. Those companies, we all trade amongst each other, but we don't just trade on the basis of some kind of nice relationship. The products have to meet some policy positioning of each company. So if you're a supermarket, you set your policies. If you're a manufacturer, like I set my policies, and those policies basically give the reference points of the product to be manufactured. Clearly, if I go into detail, there's specifications and stuff, but it's just keeping it at a high level. And what you'll find as you move along is that, the reporting of all of this sort of effort and progress and, programs that different companies sort of engage in, they report it in something called triple bottom line, which is what John Elkington said. And I was very familiar with that, and I used that very early on to help the companies understand, and my boards, etc. And you report for people on social performance, and there are standards now, very, very clear standards. On planet, environmental performance, then there's loads of work streams, that I've been involved in just on environmental. And of course, then you've got the financial performance. And there is an ideology in part of the movement on the conservation side that profit is bad. And, I'm not a guy that came from the commercial world. I was in government, in policy for a number of years. It's really important to appreciate that unless a company is making profit, it cannot reinvest in the program. And it's really very important to understand how important this is. I don't necessarily mean you have to make these distorted profits, but it's very important. I don't believe you can have a sustainable business that doesn't make a profit. We're not, organizations and companies are different. Companies are not philanthropic organizations. So with this in mind, I'm going to approach this in a sort of a really, hopefully quite simple fashion to try and help. Is there such a thing as a sustainable product? And you've heard Paul describe, some of the things in the textiles industry. And in fact, because I was in the supermarketing industry right at the beginning of sort of this, part of my phase in sustain, I understood about a number of standards before I moved into the manufacturing. And one of them, because of clothing and textiles, was ethical trading. In the UK, we effectively created something called the Ethical Trading Initiative because of the poor worker standards in the clothing and toy sectors. Now, that's just one little small example to help you understand how standards get created. And what I've done is I've done a really simple diagram to help explain about sustainable development programs and how they have distinct stages of risk management, progression, and disclosure. And goodness gracious, in the last company I was managing 52 scorecards across the world. Every single function had a scorecard, including finance, and they're all at different points on this journey. Even though that company had the most sustainable product in its sector, I still wouldn't let the business say that we are sustainable. Now, how do you know what is sustainable? Well, it's actually, there's some really rough measures that you can use, some really important principles. And the first one is, you're definitely not sustainable. How do you know that? Well, clearly, if you are, let's just say, producing a furniture product and you're trashing a forest to do that, then clearly that's not very sustainable. But actually, it's even more fundamental than even environmental impact. Then you start to engage in responsibility, as I call it, and I'll come on to what that means. You start to demonstrate responsibility, you become more sustainable, and you reach a point where through some kind of independent verification, certification, you find an aspect of what you are sort of working on. It could be the forest that I just mentioned, it could be the packaging, it could be the land-based agricultural product, it could be anything of that nature, it could be social, ethical, and you can make a claim around what I call a sustainability dimension. Now, this is where greenwashing comes in, because some companies, they're very, very excitable, especially marketing.
Peter, you are mute now.
Oh, sorry. Guys, have I been talking and you're not listening to me? My goodness, you should have told me. I didn't realize.
Peter,
Oh, no,
is what my thought.
Yeah.
You were unmuted. You were muted because somebody was coming in.
Okay, all right.
I wrongly muted you.
Yeah, you
Sorry.
talk about up to the greenwashing, and then
greenwashing. Yeah. Okay, good. So, and this is where we get greenwashing, because what you find is marketers are under terrific pressure to try and differentiate their products in the sort of consumer space. Some products may have taken years to get to this point, and they're very excited to celebrate, communicate that. Some companies actually, when they do bigger things, especially now on net zero, some companies are making claims and they don't really actually understand that they're greenwashing. This is really important to understand. It's another debate altogether. Anyway, as we're moving along the journey of this particular product, and I'll come on to show you a sort of very simple example, you may find a product, a single keeping unit, and I said I've launched 3,500 of them in my career so far that are brand new from scratch. And you may find that that particular product is really the most sustainable in the marketplace. It ticks all the boxes on all the environmental aspects, including water, waste management, energy management, circularity, etc., ethical trading. And you'll find I've not yet seen a product that has got 100% of all the risk factors covered just yet. Honestly, I have not. And I do look, there are some fantastic examples, but the challenge is when you do get there, and as we learn more, especially around the standards and what we certify and the metrics we use, there's always a continuous improvement principle that all standards should have, because I've been involved in 15 years of standards. Where they were before and where they are now are very different. And that's why I believe that, in fact, sustainability is never a never-ending journey. And I've put this infinity there because you just keep on progressing on that journey. That's, my learnings in sustainability. Now, very quickly, if I can just make this move forward. So here's some really important principles. There's no such thing as a product that can be sustainable if it's illegal. It's just absolutely, it's not just greenwash, it's illegal. It's as simple as that. So responsibility really starts the moment a product, a company that's making that product meets two very important principles: local regulations and some very important market access regulations. If you don't meet regulations, really, it's not even greenwash, quite frankly. And what happens is you have to tidy that aspect of responsibility up, as I said, and we're going on the journey. We start to improve and progress one of the environmental social pillars, you identify the risks, you start to put in mitigation programs, improvement programs, it could be natural capital, biodiversity, stewardship, it goes on and on. There's so many different things. And you really, really must start to think about verification. And the reason for that is you can't possibly be credible. I don't accept, and I've never accepted that. It's always been a request that I've had of all my suppliers. I've gone into supermarkets that I've supplied to help them understand why they have to adopt the standard themselves. And you reach a point where you become a bit more credible when you're certifying to some kind of a standard. And in my career, I've looked at 200 roughly or so food standards, but I do know there's 400 that exist in some way. Some of them really are very weak, they're not credible. And there's some very important principles around what makes a standard credible. We have ISO standards around that. There's even regulations around that. It's just understanding how the standards sort of governance process works. And there's also the UN, which is the only body that harmonizes some codes of conduct, which aren't that many, but nevertheless, they do exist. And that's important for trading. So if I just move a little bit further, I'll just give you an example of, we've reached the point where we can make this claim, and I've given this a half a tick because it's not sustainable. It's just got a dimension that is more responsible. So we've got the responsibility, we've got some responsible sourcing going on, we've got some good manufacturing processes going on. In other words, they're meeting specific standards around responsibility, safety, health and safety, all the other aspects that, and there are many good manufacturing practice standards in all sectors, not just food, all the car, textiles, etc. And there's also how is it made? And I'm talking about the social, ethical trade and the social compliance side. There are regulations, health and safety, etc., accident rates, work, wages, all of these kind of things, collective bargaining, unions, all of these things. And we use certain principles there again as reference points, which in this case would be the United Nations International Labour Organization. But that's just the principle. There are schemes that underpin that. And you've reached the point where your product is more sustainable, but it isn't sustainable just yet. And the reason for that is because we still haven't got the full metrics understood. And to help you understand that, I've just made a very simple illustration. I'll give you a warning. It's a personal device. Let's just look at it very quickly on the environmental and social, really high level stuff. If you look at a proper personal device in the big companies, they've got spreadsheets and spreadsheets of it. Let's just assume that the company makes this product and it complies with local regulations and market access regulations. That means in the local market and in the export market. And there are actually quite a lot of standards in this space. The radiation space, the Wi-Fi, all of this, there's masses of standards. But let's just imagine we're at high level and we've got a case and the components, and let's just say that they're responsibly sourced because we've got to source all of those raw materials. Let's just move on to how they make it. Again, it's responsibly made. And the factory workers, etc., ethically traded and socially all compliant. But guess what? On the battery, there are components, ingredients inside the battery that actually have got modern slavery upstream in the supply chain. Now that, in my eyes, cannot be viewed as sustainable because modern slavery in today's day and age is actually, it isn't even the minimum responsible sourcing. So that wouldn't be possible. You wouldn't get a certification for ethical trading or a third-party certification for that. It's why some companies try and hide that. And this is where we start to get greenwash or lack of transparency. And then let's just go on to the carbon side, which obviously is very popular at the moment because of the climate issue, etc. They've got the carbon insights. They've done a life cycle analysis or a carbon intensity, but they actually haven't got a future mitigation plan because they keep on changing their components every year because of design, and they haven't really done independent verification of what they're doing. That's just an example. Now, to be fair, many of the good companies are very, very good in this, but this definitely does remain a really big risk. And there's a very, very famous car that you are all familiar with that is making tremendous progress on the roads, but actually it's very red in a particular aspect of its manufacture. So what you can do is you can make sustainability claims, but you've got to do them in a manner that is not greenwash. It meets the local regulations, and there are labeling regulations and we're getting a bit better now. I think the EU is a bit better. America is particularly weak on policing US, sort of green claims. And you reach this point where greenwashing starts to emerge, sometimes because companies do it intentionally, or they simply don't have the kind of disciplines and processes that I had in the companies that I've run, which is this, what I call product integrity and authenticity. It's an authentication tool, but it also authenticates sustainability. And I'll stop there because of the 10-minute timeline. Does Gen Z care? Well, yes, they do. They're a very different generation to, they're far more knowledgeable. They've got a very different moral compass. But my understanding and experience of consumer purchasing is that the research always says that they care and they'll pay more, but when it comes to the point of paying, especially in supermarkets, they don't necessarily pay as much as they say they would. Generation Z, though, is very different to the other sort of groups. They really are aware and they do follow those brands that are more sustainable, or at least, give, the impression of being green. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, he touched a great topic. So many topics, actually. He's starting from what is the three pillar of the sustainability, and then it touch upon the triple bottom line, and then he touched upon the very important aspect of the how make the sustainable product standard, regulation, responsibility, and then finally how actually the sustainable product will be related to a business case, whether they can be get the Gen Z customer attention, or get the favor. Okay, so we can discuss further because he touched a lot of the topics. So it's a good building block we can discuss later. Okay, next F. He is an expert in LCA, so it's a good opportunity to learn about this important topic.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, let me share my slides. Yep, there you go. I just learned how to do this. So, okay. So my topic, as Alex said, is on life cycle assessment, and I think Paul and Peter has given a very good introduction of what sustainability is and how it has developed over the years, and how we've moved on from this defining sustainability as or sustainable development as preserving our planet for future generations, to now talking more about metrics and measuring and how sustainable products are. And life cycle assessment is one of the methodologies that you can use to measure sustainability to a certain extent. And while I say here green or not, like Peter said, no product can be completely green, because we have to produce them, and when we produce them, we use energy, we use materials. So nothing can be completely green. We can only hope that a product is greener compared to an incumbent product or competitor or existing technology. So a little bit about myself. I'm Abhijit. I am a senior consultant. I work at Sfera in product sustainability, and I do life cycle assessments for a living. And today I talk about why life cycle assessment is important in decision making. And as we know, we are bombarded with all these advertisements which claim sustainable products, sustainable packaging. There are all sorts of claims that are made in marketing campaigns nowadays, and these claims are made because like we've already established, people do care, and especially Gen Z Gen Z. In fact, some reports suggest that that they care more than anybody else right now. So it is important for companies and corporations to make these claims and market their products as sustainable products. But it is also important for us to understand whether these claims are real, and like Peter said, some of this is not just greenwashing, and it's not always intentional greenwashing. Sometimes you make a certain claim, and if that is not substantiated with a detailed analysis, a holistic analysis, like a life cycle assessment, that could turn out to be that you're just burden shifting. You're claiming that a product is sustainable in one aspect, but you're ignoring some other aspect that is important, which is often covered when you do a complete life cycle assessment. So one important thing to remember in a life cycle assessment is that you're doing life cycle thinking. Another way of calling that is cradle to grave assessment. So life cycle assessment is also known as cradle to grave assessment. So when we're looking at a product, we are not just looking at a product and its use. We are also looking at how did the materials that go into production of these consumer products, how were they extracted from the nature? So the first step for any manufacturing of product is to get the resources from the nature, and these could be oil and gas, coal, minerals, biomass, anything that comes from the nature. So that's what we refer to as cradle, and products extraction from the nature. That's the cradle part of it, and then we take it to manufacturing plants where we add energy, other materials and make them into a final product, which is then distributed to different markets, and we buy them and we use them, and finally it goes to its grave. So often it goes to a landfill, sometimes it is recycled. There are different ways of disposing of these products, and when we talk about circular economy, we often talk about reusing these products or recycling, making more valuable products out of the waste rather than just throwing them away. But so sometimes now we're moving from cradle to grave to cradle to cradle analysis, where we say these products are recycled or reused. So we need to consider the next lives of these products as well. But it is important to consider the entire life cycle of a product when we think about environmental impacts that these products can have. So let's get into the definitions of life cycle assessment, or the international standards that govern life cycle assessment. So this is a framework for performing a life cycle assessment, and this is defined by international standards ISO 14040 and 44. So any life cycle assessment that is done and independently reviewed or verified has to follow these standards. And these are broad guidelines, and there are many industry specific standards that you can refer to. So life cycle assessment can be done in 4 steps, or has to be done in 4 steps. The first step is to define goal and scope, and that has to be clearly defined. Then you go on and do life cycle inventory analysis, and that is a major step in doing life cycle assessment, as you go to each step in the production process, right from cradle to grave, and collect information on inputs and outputs at each of this stage, so as to evaluate the impacts caused by these inputs and outputs on the environment at each stage of this product. And that is done in the life cycle impact assessment, which are often scientific models that relate this life cycle inventory to different impact categories. And finally, it is important to interpret the results and discover what the hotspots are. By hotspots, I mean what are the areas or what are the life cycle stages where there are maximum impacts, and understand trade-offs, etc. And that's what we do in the final step, which is interpretation of results, and then take corrective action based on that. So if you have to define life cycle assessment or LCA, it evaluates environmental impacts holistically and not as a one-time pollution occurring from a use of a product or from an activity. So from traditional way of looking at environment where we used to focus on end of pipe treatment. So for example, in chemical industries, we were focused on what is coming out of that, the pipeline there in the wastewater, etc. We're not just looking at that, but we're looking at the entire life cycle. So here's an example of life cycle of a car, right? So in the use of the car, or when we use a car, we focus on the emissions from the car, the on-road emissions. So there's CO2 emissions, CO emissions when you burn the fuel, and other emissions that pollute, particulate matter, etc. But we also have to look at how the car was manufactured, and that starts from raw material extraction. So any metals that go into it, where was it mined? Any plastic that goes into, how was that produced? All of the component manufacturing in the production has to be evaluated. Then we evaluate the use of the car in terms of how much fuel was burned and how long does the car run. And then finally, once at the end of the useful life of the car, we determine what happens to different components that we've used in the car, how much of that can be recycled, how much of that has to go to landfill, how much of that could be maybe incinerated, and we can get energy out of it. So that's an example of how you would perform a life cycle assessment. This is an example that I like to give, and this is older data, but it still is relevant. We often hear that electric vehicles are a solution to climate change, and I'm not saying that they're not, but it's life cycle assessment that will help us understand this, whether that's what an electric vehicle can do or not. So, for example, what does an electric vehicle do? It doesn't burn any of the fossil fuels like gasoline or diesel, right? So there is less emissions when you drive the car. But you use electricity to charge that car. And if that electricity comes from a non-clean source, such as, say, coal, which has much higher emissions than natural gas and much higher emissions than solar electricity, then it's quite likely that over the life cycle of the car, an electric vehicle might emit more CO2 compared to petrol or gasoline vehicle, right? So it is important to evaluate not just the use of the car, or rather use of the car and use of the fuel, but also use of the fuel in terms of how the electricity is generated and how the alternative fuels are generated, to clearly understand whether on a life cycle basis the car performs better compared to other cars. Here's another example of results in LCA. So it's not always about GHG emissions. It's not always about carbon, right? So the life cycle assessment also helps us in evaluating other environmental impacts. So just like in electric vehicle, we are not shifting the burden from on-road emissions to emissions in a power plant. It is also important to understand that there are reasonable trade-offs when we select one product over the other, and we understand these trade-offs using different environmental metrics. So life cycle assessment helps us do that. So here's a comparison of different polymers. I won't go into the details of it, but you'll see that global warming, which is GHG emissions, is one of the categories, and in each category there is a different polymer which performs better than the other. So it is the duty of the practitioner and the consumer to evaluate these results properly and understand which one would be the best option out of this. Like I said, there's not none of these are absolutely green products. Which one could be a greener product compared to the other? So like I said, life cycle assessment has applications for everyone here. So consumers, to make sure that we're making greener choices, once we understand details of what the impacts are at different stages, we can be more aware and participate in policy. For corporations, it's very important to discover hotspots and work on them, increase efficiencies, which often leads to profits, and that's also very important in sustainable development. And for governments, it's also important to understand future technologies that they're investing in, and understand holistically whether on a life cycle basis, that's something that would benefit sustainable development and improve on metrics such as climate change. But LCA cannot do it all, of course. LCA just looks at the environmental aspect of sustainability. There's also social and economic, and for all the different sustainable development goals, all of these three pillars are important, and it's important to understand all of them together, not just the environmental part of it. Finally, I'll leave you with this picture, which comes from this website called LCA Art. This was created by my old research group, and you'll see similar pictures on this website. But what it tries to depict here is that while we're consuming any product, it is important to ask questions on where is it coming from, what has gone into it, not just in terms of ingredients, but in terms of energy, in terms of resource extraction from the nature, in terms of where is it going to go after use, right? So here's an example of a consumer who is eating a burger. And on a life cycle basis, each quarter-pound burger leads to enough nutrient pollution to produce about 1 square meter of thick algae. So and it's also important here to understand that it's not always about carbon. There are other environmental parameters, there are other environmental metrics that we need to understand, and then we need to act on. So this is just an example of this. And always think a life cycle. Always think about a product holistically. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I think that the LCA is really important tools to measure your sustainability performance. And then actually, I think that it's funny that why, for example, we have a lot of the sustainable measurement standard out there, and then they are all related to accounting, the Peter set up a responsibility about how we actually protect our environment and society. But not many actually the people are not familiar with this LCA except they're expert. But I think that this is really, really important, especially for for example, relate to carbon footprinting. For example, you give the very, very good insight about for electric vehicle, because people just think about your product electric vehicle means that's a sustainable green, right? But it is not, right? Because it should be measured in a complete life cycle. So that's very important topic. We should think about it. Thank you. Okay, so next, Alexis, you can start now.
Thank you, Alex. First of all, I would like to thank Alex and Laura for this invitation. It's an honor for me to present our company and actually what we are doing to change or contribute in this sustainable and green world. I think previous speakers said exactly how we can contribute on that. My name is Alex. I'm co-founder and managing director of TiiQu. TiiQu started 2017, and our main mission and vision was to transform espresso supply chain from linear to circular. We use spent coffee ground as a new raw material, this coffee waste of coffee shops, a new raw material to develop new kind of products to extend the life cycle, as the previous speaker said, to extend the value that we can get from 1 kilo of coffee. So this was the main idea. What actually we are doing, we separate our value chain into 4 phases, and we have 4 different stakeholders. How we look at the value chain we create from the early days, we want to develop an ecosystem around the spent coffee ground, because we strongly believe that if you want to upcycle or to contribute into a sustainable world, you have to create an ecosystem around your product or service rather than a value chain. So we develop an ecosystem with 4 main stakeholders. The first and one of the most important stakeholders is the sourcing partner, the partner that creates this new raw material, the places that create this kind of waste is the coffee shops. We all know this type of businesses that we are drinking espresso, and a lot of volumes of spent coffee grounds are created in a daily basis. In the second stakeholder is the supply partner, is the partner that collects this kind of waste, spent coffee ground, and bring it into our facilities to start the treatment process. We are trying to use reverse logistic process, so to keep the CO2 emissions, the new releases of CO2 emissions in a lower level and not increase the CO2 equivalent of this kind of product. The third partner and stakeholder of our ecosystem is the pre-treatment partner. It's the partner that actually do the first phase of the treatment and brings the spent coffee ground in a storable phase, in a phase that we can storage it and use it anytime we want to create and develop a new product for the final client. And the last phase is our facility. It's where CoffeeCo comes in the ecosystem. We use spent coffee ground in a unique extraction process we developed with the University of in Greece, in Patras, to isolate substances that can be used in skincare product. Actually, we create this this type of ingredient. It's a soluble ingredient that can be used in a skincare product like hand cream, sun care protection products, serum, etc., etc. So this is our main ecosystem we have developed, and the main idea was to extend the value of our beverage and beloved coffee. One of the main reasons we choose coffee to develop this kind of ecosystem is first because it's one of the most profitable ways to do that. We tried to do the same process with different kind of agro-industrial waste, but was not so profitable, because at the end of the day, we are a profitable business. We have to make profit for our stakeholders. And the second reason we choose spent coffee ground is because of the already existing awareness that this kind of beverage has. We thought that if we make, if we transform espresso supply chain from linear to circular in a more profitable and commercial way, consumers start thinking in this kind of way and start choosing sustainable products in their daily life. As we move on, we are focusing on 2 sustainable development goals, and this is the main factors we want to contribute. The first one is the SDG 9, Industry Innovation and Infrastructure. We develop this kind of product through more than 5 years R&D with universities, but we want to keep contributing spending into research and development, because we believe that we can develop new kind of product based on this new raw material. And the second contribution to having sustainable development goal is through the 12 goal that actually we are contributing in a more reasonable consumption and production. We are extending the value chain of coffee and creating new kind of product. Especially every year, we are upcycling more than 100 tons. We want to upcycle more than 100 tons of spent coffee ground and save more than 500 trees to use in other greenhouse gases. The main idea is to keep trees free, to encapsulate greenhouse gases that produced in processes that cannot be changed and be more sustainable. Now I'm presenting the type of the product we are producing, and the reason I'm showing the specification of the product is to show that upcycle process and upcycle production products can have the same benefits and even more benefits that the product that are using today from cosmetic companies. Our product has a high concentration of antioxidant substances in the same level that raw materials are used today from the cosmetic companies. So the main idea is to give the start to the businesses that use this kind of product, upcycle product, that it's not lower quality product, even better, it's a higher quality product because we are extending a value chain, we are decreasing the CO2 footprint for any kind of product, and at the end of the day, consumers can buy more. And speaking of consumers, a new research from NYU shows that Generation Z, the consumer category we are talking of today, they are willing to pay 30% more in a premium prices for final products that actually can claim sustainability. So what we can see from this research is that sustainable product that actually decrease the CO2 footprint they have and use sustainable ingredient from upcycled raw materials can have premium prices. And companies that use this kind of product can increase their profit margins, and at the end of the day, what get back to their stakeholders. And what we want to show with that is that sustainability is not a nice to have business for any kind of supply chain, but if you want to live and exchange, transform your business for the future, you have to apply these kind of techniques because you will actually have more profit. That's all for me. I keep my presentation in Thai and I'm ready to answer any question. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Alexis. I think it's fascinating topic, a specific example about the a circular product in a coffee and cosmetic, right? You know that because actually the Laura and me have a planning in the September about a circularity innovators nation about like exactly you, the innovator in circular economy.
Actually, we are calling
that's a fantastic example. You will definitely be invited. Yeah, the present. Yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so last one is Belly. His expertise in all aspects of the circular economy and sustainable products. So it is a good opportunity to hear from you about his experience, especially he will present some real life examples. So you can start now.
Excellent. So let me share. And just to ensure you are seeing my slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So yeah, in the short, what the FairOn is a fintech company enabling the circular economy, and the listening, Paul, Peter, Abhishek, and the Alexis. I mean, it's all those elements what we are then taking into the retailers and the brands, and we are discussing that, hey, how we can make those products actually easily available for the end users. And we have done a massive amount of research in terms of the different generation, whatever they are, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, or Generation Z. And I'm not going to go into details, but I can just fully support the facts what has been stated in the earlier presentation, that Generation Z and those guys, how they are buying and how they are willing actually to pay more for the products which are handled in a sustainable way. It's just the truth. And we have the numbers to show this as is the truth, because we are getting thousands and thousands of products sold in the daily basis. And for in the last 12 months, we got more than 40,000 consumers. So buying the products with the sustainable way. So let's make some facts here. Let me just see this, because now I can see the whole slide for myself. So my presentation today, I'm going to focus a little about the consumer electronics, and I will give you an example of the phones. And what is actually behind the phones when they are going from the cradle to grave, and what kind of CO2 they are actually producing. So the fact is that the linear economy produces a waste. So I think that we all agree that the people are buying, but that then not really taking care about the products afterwards. So if you would come to my office, you would probably find 10, 15 smartphones here, and even if I'm saying that I would like to give them somebody or sell them somebody, they are still here in my office. So that's not something good. So looking for the next slide here. So when we are looking a little bit the numbers here and looking the electronic waste, what is actually generated in each and every year, and that this is a massively increasing 10 to 20% each and every year. So 2021, we had the 61 million tons of electronic waste generated. And this is created and the mass of the Great Fall of China, the heaviest artificial object on the earth. For people listening, this might sound, a big one and a heavy one, etc. And I would like to give you another example. Think about your smartphones. You all have it in your hand or in table. In order to produce such a kind of smartphone, we need more than 80,000 liters of water. We need to extract 281 kilograms of raw materials. And all that generates 86 kilograms of CO2. In the end, only to have a 199 gram of waste, and that is probably pretty much the size and the weight of the phone. So that's a kind of massive amount CO2, and thinking about that, where actually the CO2 and all the things are used in the beginning of the supply chain. This all goes down that it's actually goes to the mining part, and when the mining is done, that's where the most energy is used. That's where the most CO2 is used. So 2 slides about the Generation Z. So I mean, we all know it's the biggest global population, and of course this gives enormous consumption power, and hearing what Alexis was saying, I mean, and willing to pay this 30% more. Again, I mean, I fully agree on that. So, and the 90% of those, there are roughly 50-60% which are extreme conscious about the environmental issues and address the social part. But the overall 90% of them, pretty much all of them, believes that the company must to have assess actually the environmental issue. And the 75% of them, they are actually making their own research. And I can just tell this from my own kids, how they are handling, because they are Generation Z, and we have a quite an interesting discussion each and every dinner table about how to use products and which kind of products used, and so on. But what is a quite significant difference is that they are the Generation Z is not really a brand loyal. So for them, it's a much more important actually to have the ethical part, to have the environmental support for the products. And what we are seeing about the model, what you will learn about soon, how we are actually pushing the circular economy, is that more and more of the Generation Z users, they actually would like to to use the products more than assess and own the products, and ensure that whenever they have stopped using any kind of products, of course, I mean, there are products which cannot be reused, etc. But thinking about the consumer electronics today, or thinking about any kind of, I mean, consumer products, I mean, it can be, you know, bikes or optics or jewelry or baby products, or just to name it. I mean, there are massive amount of products which can be used for that. I'm always taking the example of the baby products because most of the listeners, you might have also kids, and when the kid is 4 years old and they need a bike, and guess what is happening when they are 6 years old? They will need a new bike. So would it be a nice actually to give the old bike back and can get a new one, and then resell actually the used bike for somebody who might not have the means actually to buy a completely new bike? So these are the means what we are putting into place with our fintech solution. So let's look a little bit how do we buy products today. So I mean, usually I think that we all do it in the same way, that we just ask the Uncle Google to find us the products. We read some reviews, we find the retailer, and then we are starting to shop the deals. And in terms of the payment option, what we have, I mean, of course, there is a one-off payment options. There are some installments what we are made with the 3 to 4 months installment. Maybe they are the credit for the specific time, or cryptocurrencies, or any other. And yes, regardless what the payment model we have been using to get our products, we will enjoy the product until the product is too old, or we are having a so-called FOMO effect, the fear of missing out, or you know, the friends, they are using another products, and you know, I'm using the old one and I just would like to have the new product, or it just doesn't fit anymore my needs. It might be that, hey, now I have so many applications and I had the 64 GB of memory on my phone, but now I absolutely need the 128 GB, etc., etc. So these are the most typical reasons why we are then actually switching from one product to another one. And the last week I was in the one sustainability event in the Paris, and I got a pretty decent and interesting feedback that the 88% of the French people, they are actually changing, for example, mobile phones when there is absolutely no need to change them. So I think that this more goes to the fear of missing out and just to have a nicer product. So, but what happens for the old products, this makes me a bit crazy and unhappy, and that's the reason why FairOn is here to help on that. So what happens for the old product? So as said, are we throwing it away? Are we storing it? Are we selling it? Or are we giving it away? I have tried the last one, giving it away for my own kids, and they are just looking at me like seeing a ghost and seeing that this cannot be serious. Are you really seriously trying to give your old phone for me? No way. So at least it hasn't been working with me. So probably I should ask the old phones for my generation Z kids to give them back for me rather than buying a new product for myself. The question, of course, for us as a user is there that are there no other options which are more affordable, which are more sustainable, which are more environmentally friendly and green, so to say? And yes, there is a better way. And here in the right hand side, you will see the logo, which is called like a buy with FairOn. You can think that this logo is now there used by the retailers, branding rules or the brand branding rules. So it can be an Apple with whom we are working. It can be a retailers like a Complete. It can be a brands like a Steel or LG or Samsung, etc., etc. So what is what is behind of that all? So there has been already a few other ways to show what the circular economy is, but in the sake of simplicity, not only produce, sell, and use, and then to throw it away, then we are reusing it. And we are reusing it until end it's not anymore possible to use. And of course, this is very much depending of the products what we are using. Mobile phones might be reused and recycled 2, 3, or 4 times. Laptops, the same stuff. But then there are other products, they might be not usable more than 2 times, but they're even using some products 2 times, which actually prolongs the life cycle of the products, and then to actually to diminish the raw material extractions. And what we are seeing here as a company, because we are working with the leading brands around the world, and I'm really talking about the brands, not too much about the retailers. The mindset of the brands are shifting heavily these days. I think that Paul was mentioning in the very beginning that, hey, is this actually leading to the fact that the brands are pushing more and more products into the market, etc.? German people would say jein, which means yes and no. Yes and no in the way that the brands are actually looking into their supply chains and figuring it out that how they can actually to make a more responsible consumption and the productions and getting towards to the carbon mitigation and the CO2 targets. Because remember that if the brands are now allowing that, hey, we as a brand, we are taking the products back for us. Now they might have to change something. An example of the phone or a laptop, etc. I mean, in the laptops, I mean, it's usually a battery which has to be changed. In the phones, it's normally a display or another things which has to be changed. But if you are thinking the impact, the environment impact, I mean, it's probably 80% less to actually make the product do it in the recycled way than the doing completely new product. And remember, this 80,000 liter of waters to create a new product, or 280 kilogram of raw material is used for the new phone, which are extracted in the mines. I mean, for the recycled products, it's not at all the case. So we as a fair owner, we feel the market campaign and offer the change. So there is a massive demand with the various market movements, which are actually going for the green offering and the sustainability, circular economy, carbon credits, and etc. And what we haven't discussed today is that there is also massive silicon shortage today, and this has also led to the fact that in the country where I'm taking this call now from the France, is that if I'm taking all those smartphones which are used, the 17.2% all the sold smartphones are actually secondary phones. So
Barry, you are now muting.
Can you guys hear? Yep.
Yep.
How much you missed me? I think that it was just made unmute the other people, but
Oh, not much. Yeah, you can start.
Okay. So yes, I mean the market movements are there, and even the special project what we have in the Ukraine today is also leading to the fact that the energy prices are getting high, and the people have to start to think about it, what we can do for that. So that's the reason why the retailers, why the brands are also looking more and more about the circular economy and then the recycling their products. So but now something is happening that I'm gonna change my slides here. Let's put it here. So let me introduce you for the sustainable subscription for the circular economy, and I'm just going to put you in the 9 steps. We are not going to spend too much time, but the 9 step to actually to highlight you what is the consumer journey for the generation X or Z or X or millennials or even baby boomers who are buying the products. So first of all, they are making the product choice. There will be a financial application for the users. There is the financial agreement, and that is a real-time agreement made by the banks. And this is the important part when it comes to the product renewal options. So with the retailers and the brands, we are not saying that, hey, when they are selling their products, the consumers, they have to actually to get the product renewal. So the end customers, they can actually make a choice if they want to have a product renewal or if they want to just to keep their product for the longer period. But putting a little bit of facts here, so the consumer survey what we made with over 4,000 consumers in the various countries, actually over 70% of the consumers and the massive amount of generation Z and quite a bit of millennials on top of that are actually opting for the product renewal. So it's very, very clear on that side. So assuming that the consumers, they have really made this, let's say, a responsible selection of the renewal, they will have the choice to choose another product, and they will receive the new product, and they are returning the old product. And here it comes where it is very important that the old product reaches our inspection center. We will look at, okay, is it still reusable? Can we put it in the market to the second time? Can we put it in the market in the third time, etc., etc. And when we cannot put it anymore, then we are recycling all the parts of the products accordingly. And let's say that the product has been received and they are in the old good conditions. We will actually to pay the remaining credit of the consumers for the banks, and that they will get the payment confirmation as a consumers as well. And then we are restarting the cycle again. So this basically means that when the payment confirmation for the old product has been made for there, it means also that we have already made the assessment of the old product and the conditions, and that we might have been changing some displays or batteries, etc. And then we are putting it again into the market as a secondary product. So this all might sound like complicated, but put it in the simplicity. There are three parties which are involved in this unique partnerships, and Fair On, we are really, I would say, that the orchestrator to between the consumers, between the retailers brand and the banks who are providing the financing part for the products itself. In terms of the value for the consumers, yes, it is interesting to hear what Alexis was saying, that they are more than keen to pay the 30% more, but actually with our model, the consumers, they are actually paying less for the product price itself. And what is interesting is that because the Generation Z specifically, they are giving a so massive impact and the thoughts about the environment, they can actually get it directly with such a kind of circular economy products what we have put for them. So when we are thinking about the retailers or the brands, so think about it. If you are a brand or if you are a retailer, and even knowing that the Generation Z might not be, the brand loyal, but if there has been this brand who has been showcasing that they are actually very nicely taking care about those products and putting them into the market, this will actually increase the binding the customers and the loyalty. And of course, in the same time, is also the recurring sales is getting better. Lead conversations are getting better, because those marketing money doesn't have to be anymore used for that, but maybe to make more products which are more sustainable and following actually the carbon mitigation and the CO2 targets. And tomorrow I'm actually seeing that the retailers and the brands, they are actually starting to show the CO2 targets more and more for the individual products as well. So this is a very positive movement what we are currently seeing. So moreover for the retailers, if you think about it, that hey, when the retailers are, for example, selling not only products, but they might be selling products which are including some kind of installation or maintenance. Steel, for example, this worldwide leading gardening company, they are using this program, the Fair On program, actually to sell their products, which is actually including the installation, they lawnmower robots. It's including the yearly maintenance. It is including the yearly storage of those products, so that the steel employers, they are actually picking up those robots, those lawnmowers from your place, in the September-October time frame when the grass is anymore not growing, and then getting it back in the April. But also to ensuring that the lifetime of the product is going to be longer because they are well maintained. So good in that, and I will stop on that. So anybody who is interested to learn about that more, so do reach out to us. To look our webpage fairon.com, or send us just a email with the info@fairon.com, and we can take it from there.
Thank you, Billy. Before we starting our discussion and Q&A session, our speaker Absi has another important meeting, so he should leave before starting our discussion. So,
yeah, just want to say
comment. Yeah,
yes, just want to say thanks, Alex and Laura. It's nice. Thank you for inviting me to talk. It was nice meeting you all. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them on LinkedIn. So please get in touch. I have to leave for an important meeting. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye.
Yeah, actually, the Billy's presentation is very, very good insight about actually what happened, actually, how it is difficult and how it is complex to talk about the sustainable product and life cycle management, and especially it touch upon like a smartphone that we use every day, right? Because I agree with him, because particularly I'm a more conservative, so I'm thinking about like the useful life of the smartphone is like, for example, iPhone, I think of more than 5 years, but my daughter's frequently changed. Mine is like iPhone 10, but my daughter's iPhone 13 or something recently. So it's a generation gap, right? So we need to care about what is related with the sustainable product, and then what is the like consumer behavior, and then what is adopted in different generations. Yeah, that's a very important topic we should be discussing in shortly. Okay, so thank you for every great talk and presentation. So we'll start our Q&A and discussion session. So in the discussion and Q&A session, first we'll take a question from audience. So we want active participation from the audience. So if you have a question, then you can ask directly. And then also we taking in the like you can also take ask your question in chat window. So let's just start our discussion session.
It's just
Manuel?
a question from Maynard.
Yeah, Manuel.
First thing, thank you to all the presenters. There's so much useful information that I'll go directly to the TiiQu question. How can we process this information to make it into actionable information? Let me summarize something also that I heard today. Generation Z is ready to pay more, but when I look at the statistic, Generation Z is not the richest generation in the world at the moment. So how can we mitigate between these two contradictory statements? They're ready to pay more, but they don't have money. So that's one question. The other is, again, how we take all this information and making actionable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can give the answer. Yeah.
Sorry, Alex. Thank you, Manuel, for your question. I don't know if I can answer all of your question. Look, there is, I think what we've done is capture almost like a camera, is just snapshot of the whole world of sustainability. I have to say, I look at LinkedIn every day and I look at someone who says something about, there is no action and there is no progress. And I actually, from someone from industry, I find it really frustrating that there is this perception there is no action. In fact, it's industry that's been doing more than governments and regulation, actually. Certainly in many of the sectors that I've operated. And in fact, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, when he was at the COP26 in Glasgow, he did mention this point. And I was glad he did, that industry is engaged. But what I have learned, and as I said, I've been managing now developing countries as well as Western developed countries, say, let's just say Europe and the US, North America, is there is a really big gap in capability to be able to implement some of the understanding that we now have around how to be more sustainable. Now, let me give you just one very good example. In Mexico, Honduras, and Indonesia, which I was managing, my biggest focus was on building the capability of the workforce. But in Europe, my biggest focus wasn't at all on that. It was on certification and all these other things. Because we had to bring the capability of the workforce up to a certain standard to be able to understand what the certifications, the standards even meant, because we had to translate them. And in these countries, especially Indonesia, they are very, very CSR driven. It's almost a model the government insists that if you're there, you must have some kind of social, sort of interaction and contribution, and had a very big CSR program. So you have to equalize all of these kind of things. But and they understand sustainability in these countries as CSR, whereas and I was a CSR director, I was a chief sustainability officer in 2008. All these things keep on moving around, and honestly, I just think that there has been so many different models and different standards and everything coming. It's almost going to need some kind of regulation to tidy it up at some point. But as we know, regulators are generally behind the curve of the most advanced, sort of progressive companies. But I understand and hear what you say, and it's something that I really am working on in the background. How do we make people understand what is a real solution and answer to a problem instead of just theory and apocalyptic, more research? Because we really don't need any more research to know we need to fix the issue. We've got enough research. It's waste of money. We just keep on hearing research and research. Not necessarily much of it. It's just, perpetuating, other things. What I can say about General Z, and I'm a supermarketeer, I've been selling iconic brands in all these countries. I repeat what I've been seeing now for, honestly, years and years of consumer research, from my brands into the supermarkets, all the certification standards who want to be adopted. The behavior of the purchase, the consumer, is always different to what the research finds. There's a big difference between consumer-focused groups, insights, and what they do. But Generation Z, Manuel, is going to become more affluent. And in any case, good brands do not ask consumers, do you want us to be more sustainable? I've never even thought of that. I've just said, I own a brand that is 150 years old. I'm a custodian of a 65. I'm not going to ask my consumers, do you want me to be more sustainable? They expect me to sell them sustainable, nutritious, safe food. That's it. That's what they expect of us. And really, Generation Z, they expect brands to be doing exactly that kind of thing for the products they sell. That's my
Peter, I think in your presentation, your great presentation, I shall say, you actually indicated that there is a lot of greenwashing. So what I'm concerned are the two, in addition to the financial or the current financial status of Gen Z, if they don't start to become jaded about greenwashing.
It's very true, and I'm really concerned about that, which is why in the businesses that I've run, I designed this authentication tool, because I'm the guy that the marketeers come and say, Pete, why can't we say this in the advertising? Why can't we put this on the packaging? And I remind them that, marketeers generally want to push what I call the envelope of truth. They want to get on the border of illegality, okay? And it's all about brand reputation. You can go and there's been some very famous brands recently who, they've gone and greenwashed, and over here in the UK, the Advertising Standards Authority has had to ask them to withdraw their marketing campaigns. So we're beginning now to see regulators, and I almost do think that, the large countries need to get together on agreeing some regulatory oversight of, claiming.
Thank you very much.
It's very, very going to be needed. Thank you for your question, but I hope I answered as best as I can anyway.
Yes, thanks.
in addition to the Peter's answer, actually, I originally from South Korea, and then I think that the why Gen Z is important because usually in most of the Asian country, the Gen Z's parents are rich, you know. So usually the Gen Z can utilizing their parents' rich to buy. So for example, I'm not much concerned about whether it's sustainable or not because of my generation philosophy, but the Gen Z's, for example, they value the sustainable product, and they even if they are not affordable, but their parents can support them. So usually that's why my daughters all have a newest iPhone. So if they want a sustainable product, yeah, they can be contribute a lot. So that's why we concern about the sustainable product with respect to Gen Z.
So in the future, she will swap the phone with you, so she gets a sustainable iPhone 10, and you get the 14 or 13, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just a joke.
Okay, so is there any question? I think that they also relate to like a greenwashing. So actually the manner we collaborate starting for example like the profitability and sustainability, and then we're looking at the detail about the recent conundrum because a lot of people are concerned about the sustainability and environment, but actually in the business practice, actually, it is very difficult to completely include your sustainable practice in your like everyday business practice because of this. There is some gap to return by the sustainable value and profitability, like a short-term return. And then so actually we are looking for some evidence of the whether if you go sustainable, and the Peter set up the triple bottom line that. Well, not only just for the we get the value from the we care about the people, planet, and the society, but also they make the good product, like a profitable product, actually that can buy from the consumers or something like that. So that's one actually we think about. Otherwise, actually, the greenwash will keep going on because that's the easiest way. So that's another point that we can think about.
Yeah, as I said, I don't look. I've been looking at this very closely, and some of the greenwashing that occurs. Certainly, I can talk for the industry that I understand of food. Is actually naivety on the part of the companies, because what they generally do is they outsource some of their communications to agencies who are not necessarily experts. They're communicators. They're not operators, and that sometimes creates problems. Marketers generally, do what marketers do. They try and make, very big claims, but let me give you, some examples, and I'll sort of refer a bit to ESG language. Once you establish your materiality risks and you start to get into disclosure, I've been a part of a really big project that I had to, mobilize about 11 CEOs of really large companies to drive a global supply chain into, more responsibly managed status, if I put it diplomatically. But by the end of, 4 years of really big effort, government negotiations of all these different sources, there was about 1.4 million tons of this raw material that was released into the market that was certified in addition to the existing. And some really famous brands that you all know, they put the eco label on the packs, on their products, and they sell it. But the benefit to all those companies was that because there was more supply, product, raw material actually dropped in price. And we all saved money. And that's how we got the return on the original 4 years of investment. That's just one very, very small example. And the other most obvious one is when you reduce energy, especially in the early days when we were starting to understand, about carbon, you reduce your energy bill. So it doesn't always necessarily cost, but, it depends what phase a company or a program is in. Because generally first, mover sort of projects generally, require an investment. It could be resource, by the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be any more than just expertise. So that's just a couple of examples.
Actually, a footnote, Peter, but I'm coming from the telecom industry, different industry. And as a former CMO for Huawei for about 10 years, I can tell you that the marketing budgets are driven by the quarterly result. Yeah. So the feedback loop is, you get good quarterly results, you get more money to play. And the results are measured in the next quarter. So there are on a short cycle, if you compare that with the investment cycle necessary for sustainability and ESG, we are on two sort of time wars.
Absolutely right, Manuel. This is very, very important. So the innovation cycle of a product is much shorter than the, let's just say, the sustainable development of a supply chain for raw materials. You may have to negotiate with governments, for instance, for them to change even the law. I mean, I've been involved in those kind of scenarios where we've had to change the law because we insisted that they have better labor worker rights and standards, because we just didn't want to be supplied from an area that had really, really poor standards. So these things take different types of effort. Honestly, like you sort of mentioned, how do you synthesize all of this? The planet is on different streams, and there's obviously more intellectual discussions at different levels. But the biggest concern I have is at an operational level. There's different capabilities, and different countries are doing, have to start from a different point. This is really quite a real part of the challenge.
And yes, and I have maybe over 150 students now at Cornell getting sustainability certificates. So I see the same sort of mosaic you project from all over the world based on their questions and the way they approach it. And you absolutely 100% on.
Yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, I think that it's a good starting point because of the Manuel talk about the telecom industry, but we have a lot of different industry, different business characteristics. So I think that maybe a good time to hear from Paul about the fashion industry, and Alexis about coffee and cosmetic industry, and Belly about like consumer electronics and other industries. So why don't you have any comment about what we discussed about up to now, especially for the fashion industry, Paul?
What I would say, sorry, from the research that we've done, and we've sort of focus groups in Asia and North America and Europe, as well as sort of the quantitative research as well, is there is definitely appetite amongst Gen Z for sustainability that comes clearly through. I think the point about Gen Z having not a lot of money is also probably quite true in the current climate. But what's interesting, I think, from a fashion perspective, is what's being driven in China. And China is a huge, huge market for brands, fashion brands, particularly fashion. And there are, increasing was up until COVID, a burgeoning affluent class there. So I think brands are fully focused on China and will remain so because of the growth of the market, the value of that market to them. But they're also actually interesting from the research we did a specific Gen Z piece with agility back in, I think it was 2019. And there was some really interesting data coming out from the Chinese market where we were told, oh, actually sustainability means something very different in China mainland. But actually what you saw from Gen Z was a very interesting perspective on what they saw as being sustainable, what they expected in terms of product and delivery. And so I think there was some really, really interesting data coming out. And I expect that will continue to grow. So how brands respond to that, I think is really interesting as well, how they actually deliver for the markets such as China in the future.
Yeah, you talk about some technology, digital technology for the how to actually they can contribute to like a sustainable product management. Actually, recently I had my webinar. The topic was how to use metaverse. Metaverse is a recent trend in digital technology, and then the most hot topic was also fashion industry, because the fashion industry is most like actually the waste in the low material, and then not much in reuse, because a lot of the fashion clothes just the junk and waste. So we are talking about a lot of the how to utilizing this kind of new digital technology to make better in the fashion industry. So I think the fashion industry is really an important topic with respect to sustainable product and technology and the circular economy. So
I completely agree, and I think that's why the bio-based fashion sector right now is really, really interesting and evolving rapidly, and the investment into the sector is enormous, particularly if you look what's coming out of the US and North America. It's fascinating. Brands like Stella McCartney are coming through with mushroom-grown leather. I think they're sort of launching that this summer. Other brands are coming through, and it's seeing it everything from leather to other materials. And it's a really, really interesting step forward. I think the challenge is clearly, can those products actually compete with the sort of, the real leather equivalents? Do they have the same kind of longevity, consumer acceptance? But it's a really positive, arguably, step forward for the trade. The challenge is still how you deal with fast fashion, the waste issue, and we've been sort of exchanging communications on the chat with some of those on the call about issues in developing nations where a lot of this textile waste is sent, and therefore how do you reuse it? What happens when it's sort of end of life, going to landfill? And there are really huge problems still. And I know brands are certainly investing into sustainability, even the fast fashion brands. But as we saw only in the last week, one of the leading fast fashion producers announced that they would have to increase prices because of the energy crisis, because of the cost of living crisis. And therefore, will sustainability be pushed back slightly, because ultimately they're going to have to focus on trying to keep those costs down. So there are some real challenges there as well. But it's a really interesting space right now. But I think the innovation side is really fascinating.
Thank you. How about Alexis? Can you share your experience in other industry, coffee or cosmetic or other retails?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I think what the previous speaker said, cosmetic industry, but also fashion industry, it's in a position that can lead the change into sustainable products. And actually, this is what we are looking to happen. Also, what Paul said before is that we saw trends coming from China and in Asia to bring this change into sustainable products, and consumers and Gen Z has an educated background. They know what actually they are looking for. They can understand claims and certifications better than us and other generation and consumer categories. So actually brands and companies have to change the way that develop their products, have to apply new techniques and actually be sustainable and no greenwashing. More specific in cosmetic industry, and we are in a position to know that it's in a big change, in a big shift. We saw L'Oreal, one of the biggest companies in cosmetic industry, to start changing and using ingredients that actually bring sustainability, changing the packaging, which is another one important aspect on sustainable development when we are talking about skincare products. And we know that it's something that it's happening too. Also, one important insight that if you want to say something, it's we saw a lot of reusing on a food supply chain. A lot of things that until yesterday was waste from food supply chain now are using into raw material for other industries. I present before what can coffee waste do into cosmetic industry, but we see that a lot of other material and food waste, bio waste, are using for the production of energy, for fashion products, but also in a world of material. Alternative of goods is coming in through companies, and I think we are seeing a big shift into this kind of products.
Yeah, thank you. I think I missed something very important topic that you mentioned. Thank you for it, the sustainable packaging, right? Because the packaging is very important, but I missed it. I forgot about it to mention it.
No, it's one of the biggest important issues when we are talking about sustainability.
Yes, yes. Now, finally, Valerie, could you share your experience and expertise in like other industry?
Yeah, I mean, I can also raise the sustainable packaging, because for our company it has been a massive topic that hey, how we will choose all the envelopes, all the brown good packaging, white good packaging, that it's going to be a sustainable way made, because there are a lot of companies, they are not doing it that way, and there's a massive difference. I mean, from our company perspective, it's easier to understand because we are mostly looking at the way the very big volumes are coming out there in the consumer electronics and the bikes and gardening products. So it's easy to understand. But I would like to raise a small point for the luxury industry, because there was this big event in Paris called Change Now. They are saying that it's the world's biggest event when it comes to the sustainability. Guess who was there present? I mean, probably all the luxury brands and the textile industry, the big boys, they were all there. I mean, they are putting a lot of and massive money out of that. So what Alexis is saying, that I can, certainly the truth. There are shift going on that industry. For our company, we are not foreseeing it too much. That hey, if they are, for example, jeans, can we as a company to do recycle jeans? There were mud jeans. I think it's a UK-based company, etc. They were saying that when they will recycle or resell the jeans, they have to wash them 40 times before they go. And then I was telling, man, 40 times washing. How much energy and the water is used for that? So. I mean, there are well, the opposite is not here, but knowing really from the cradle to grave that okay, hey, in which part of the supply chain the most energy is used. So it has to be very clearly thought and measured. What can I say else? So I do not see. Even if I would like to see that, the big countries or the governments or the standardizations or whatsoever would go into the one good direction altogether, I do not see it yet. But what I do see is that there is a much more now smaller companies who are trying to make the life cycle, starting the life cycle. Because remember that when you are starting the life cycle, when you are thinking about this circular economy, if you sell a product, the second time we can think about something sustainable is after 2 years or 3 years when the second life cycle is starting. So there are massive amount of companies who hasn't even go yet to the second step and are starting to recycle it, etc. So, I'm confident of that, and I like the cause. The cause is far bigger than myself or we all together. So it's I'm confident. So. All that said, thank you very much for all the participants. I learned also some new things here, and we are looking forward. And let's do not give out. So let's push all together into the good direction. So whatever we are doing, so we get there. Actions. This is the key word.
It's true. Very true. Very true. Then absolutely true.
Alex,
Okay,
if I may, can I complete something here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I want to say that one of the main important things that will force and continue keeping this change moving is the consumers and Gen Z power that they have. I heard before that Gen Z actually want and will pay 30% premium prices, but they don't have right now the paying capacity. They are not enough rich. Yes, but they are the rich of the future. This is the kind of products that we must develop, because if we don't do that, the products that they are used today will completely change. So all this change will comes one way or another. Either we want to do it or not, because of the demand, of the market demand, and Gen Z will actually make it happen. So yeah, this is my closing statement, and thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. Laura, did you get get the answer for your question? Will sustainable
No,
product?
I was right to saying that I don't have my answer because the original question was the generation that is coming wanted, okay, but who is in? That was my question, but we'll leave it for our session in September. I leave everyone just with the one word because here are closing. And I got one point that for me is very important: ask the right questions. That's exactly what we need to think about, asking the right questions. And I think it's a matter of education. And events like this can help to build that awareness and the education that probably will drive Generation Z to ask the right question. Because the term sustainability, as many of you have said, means different things to many. So we needed to start working on the taxonomy. And on this topic, I invite everyone to contribute to Wikipedia, the encyclopedia of questions, where sustainability experts are kindly invited to say their word on what does it mean, sustainability. So thank you very much to everyone for participating, Alex for managing this fantastic talk, and to our fantastic speakers for taking the time to say their word. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All the best.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.